In this video, I'm going to show you how to create a keypad as an example of a reusable component in our app. I'm building a check-in app where people can check in their children into an event. They choose themselves, then they choose which people they're checking in, and then they continue to check in, they confirm their number, and then they get to a point where they enter a PIN number so that to secure whether the kids can be picked up, we put a PIN number in, and then that PIN number afterwards we would then ask the person to put the same PIN number in to check the kids out. And so because this is something which I'm going to use throughout the app, add the PIN in when we're checking them in as well as add them when we're checking them out, it makes sense to create a component for that we can reuse. So I'm going to do that by clicking components on the left hand side here. I'm going to add a new component and I'm just going to call it keypad, and I'm going to have a few different things. Basically our data object, which here I'm going to add, we'll just call it pin. That's just going to be an empty string. And we're going to have a method. Sorry, no, we're not going to have any methods. We're going to have props, and basically the props are, we're going to have a value that comes in, and that's going to be a type of string. And we're going to do the default value is just an empty string. And down here, I'm actually going to change this to this dot value. So basically, if we create a keypad, we can pass through what we want the PIN number to start being when we create it. And then I'm going to add what's called a watcher, and the watcher is going to watch when the PIN changes, and that's going to fire a function which is going to come through with the new PIN as it was changed. And we can just add a console log there just to see that that's working. PIN was changed, and we'll just do new PIN. And what we're going to do is emit that change. So we're going to emit the value event, and we're going to emit the value is this. So it means that when we use this component, when the PIN is changed, we're going to be able to update the rest of the app and know that the PIN was changed. So first off, that's basically what we want there. There's our JavaScript, and we can leave the CSS and HTML. I'm just going to click over here where I've got a custom component that says enter a PIN number, and I'm just going to stick, because I created the component and it's called keypad, basically the keypad tag now is going to create an instance of this component. So on the right hand side, I'm going to click here, and I'm just going to type out the word keypad as a tag, and you'll see, bang, we get a kind of a box here. It's because our keypad doesn't really have much happening at the moment. I'm going to do go back to our component over here, and let's start building the keypad. So I'm going to give it a class of keypad. It kind of makes sense. And what I'm going to do is we'll put an input at the top. We're going to make that bound to the pin, which is basically this here, this value. And so that's going to be our input. And then I'm going to create a div. I'm going to call this a row, just like this. I'm going to put a button, and we'll open a button tag, close the button tag. I'm going to add that as 1, and we'll do 1, copy and paste that, 2, 3, and then we have our, how does it go, 4, 5, and 6. And then we're going to have 7, 8, whoops, not 58, and 9. And then the last row is basically going to be a backspace, a tick, and our 0. And you'll see over on the right hand side here, we've got our keypad starting to take shape. Now, it doesn't look that great because we need a bit of styling, so I'm just going to get rid of the styles that exist at the moment. And you can see I've got a class of row, row, row. I'm just going to add .row, and we're going to write display flex, and what that should do is basically split everything inside it up to fit across the width of whatever the row is. And inside that row, I'm going to write the word button, because it's just, we're going to talk about all these button tags. And here I'm going to do display, we're going to do flex 1, and you'll see, hey, they just kind of start fitting across the screen. And I'm going to do padding 15 pixels. We'll do I've missed a little semicolon there. I'm going to do a background of RGBA, which is basically red, green, blue, and alpha. I'm going to do the color is 000, which many of you will know is black. and I'm going to do 0.1, so you can see it's kind of half C. It's 0.1 opacity, the alpha channel. And just to separate these, I'm going to write margin 1 pixel, so you can see there's actually a gap between each of these buttons. And we might get to some more styling later, but in here I'm going to add a Fluro icon. I'm going to use the Font Awesome library. I'm going to use the backspace icon, so we're going to have a back so that people can clear the pin if they made a mistake. I'm going to add another one down here, which is going to be a check, which is like a tick box once we're done. And just because there is actually an input up here, I'm going to add some styling for the input. And I'm just going to do width 100%. We'll do a border of 1 pixel solid, something like that. Actually, we'll do a lighter 0.1, something like that. And we'll do a line height of, let's say, 50 pixels, font size of 50, maybe 30 pixels. And let's put a placeholder on this. We'll do placeholder, enter your pin, and we'll just make it text align center, so it looks a little bit nicer there as well. Just change that to 20. And now we've got our input up here. Now we want to add some actions to these buttons. So I'm just going to go to each one of these buttons down here, and using Vue.js makes this really easy. I'm just going to add press spacebar. I'm going to use the @ symbol, and I'm going to right click equals, I'm going to call a function which is just going to be press, and that's we're going to pass through each of the numbers. So if you press this one, we're going to call the press function with the number 1, press function number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you get the idea. 8, 8, pressed a few things on the keypad there. This one is actually not going to be press, we're going to call this backspace, we're going to call the backspace function like that. This one's going to be press 0, and this one's going to be, let's call it done, something like that. So now I have to go up into my JavaScript here, and in the methods actually need to create these functions. So I'm going to do press, and this is going to expect the number to come through as an argument in our function, and I'm going to do a backspace, and I'm going to do a done function like that. And what we want to do is each time they press the number that's going to come through, so if we press 6, it's going to pass through 6. If we press 7, it's going to pass through 7. We actually want to do something like this, dot. We're going to get this pin, this dot pin equals, and I'm just going to open up some quotes and do a $sign there. We're going to basically get a string of this pin plus the number. So that is basically the equivalent of going, it's shorthand in JavaScript, of going this dot pin plus a space plus plus number. So it's going to be basically whatever we've typed in so far, which might be like 1. We're going to add a 2 to the end of it, and then if we click it again, we're going to add a 3 to the end of whatever it was. We could also use the positive equals way to do that, but yeah, this should do nicely. And now we can test it out by pressing the buttons, and you'll see that as I press those buttons, that number is being added. And what we want to do is go back here to our backspace icon, and basically we want to do this dot pin equals this dot pin dot slice, and I think it's 0 and -1, which is basically we're going to take the string of characters, which let's say it's this. We want to slice from the 0 index, the start of it, all the way to the end of it, take 1. That's what that's saying. And so if we do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we press the backspace, then that's great. That's all good. Now we might have to add a couple of, if I open up my console, it might crack at about a few things. No, it hasn't. It should be fine, but we could check, only if there's actually some text in there, then take it away. But yeah, it looks like it's kind of sorted itself out. It sorted itself out in that regard, so that's all cool. So we've got our pin, and that's all good. Our last one we want to do is done. This is currently watching every time the pin changes, it's emitting a value. Whereas what we may actually want to do is get rid of this and have it so that when we hit the done, we actually do this emit the value. Sorry, the input I think is the right one we want to do. This dot pin, and what that means is that the value is going to come in. We're going to update this pin number, and then when we hit done, which is this button over here, we're going to emit that new value out. So it means that up here, we can do a v model. We can go my pin. Let's say we put a pre tag up here, and we just see what my pin is here. And we can do my pin, and if we start typing this thing in, if we hit this, we'll actually see it up here. So it's up in our component, up on our page, so we can do something with it. Now, if we were just to watch it every time it changes, it would change this up here. But that's what we want, is we pass through our pin. And you'll also see that the prop part of it, so if I take my pin number and I put in a number here, it will actually set that at the very start when the first keypad is initiated. It's going to have that number because it's going to be passed through as a prop, like this prop value at the start. And because now we have a keypad, it makes it really easy to keep reusing it. So we can have 2 or 3 or 4 keypads, just like that. They're all going to work. And then if I hit done, it's going to update the, it's going to update up and things like that. So yeah, that's now we've got a keypad. We can use it on this page. We can use it on other pages. We can pop it up in a modal and all that kind of stuff. And that's how you build a Vue component. I know I've whizzed through it, but if you want documentation, if you click the question mark up here, you can get documentation on our components and what you can do. You can also get JavaScript documentation about the Fluro API, or you can just look up Vue.js. And if you look up the Vue.js documentation, it's really good, and it just makes building things in JavaScript really easy, and as you saw, really reusable. And that's how you can build a more complex Vue component that you can reuse throughout your whole app.